Hello, everyone, and welcome to a rather unprecedented stream. This is my first ever call-in show. People have been asking me for this for a very long time, that I just do a show where people ask questions and we go over random stuff from the day. Hopefully everyone's hearing me. I'm using StreamYards, so this is usually a pretty good way of keeping things balanced. I don't have technical difficulties I do with the OBS system. But the main reason for this stream, and I hope everyone's hearing me now, but the main reason for this stream is to promote the upcoming conference we're running in, well, essentially near Nashville, somewhere between Nashville and Memphis. The Scyldings Conference 2023, which I'll be speaking at, along with my friend Aaron McIntyre, Mr. Radlib, the Prudentialist, and a bunch of other people will be there. So again, tickets are still available. I think I should have the link in the description, but I kind of forgot it. But I will have it by the end of the stream. And other than that, what I'm here to do tonight is just answer people's random questions from the chat. There is an entropy link that should be in the description if you guys want to use it. Otherwise, I'll have people call in. So the way I want to do this is I want to essentially, hopefully people will DM me and I'll pass them a stream on StreamYards and can answer questions that way. Right now, I've got two people waiting in the room. I have, I'll bring in Mike of Pole for our first person here. So let's see how this works. Hello, how's it going?
How are you doing? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I think so. How's it going?
It's going fabulously. I've got myself a nice Argentinian Malbec, and I think it's going to be a good evening, and I'm looking forward to the event. I mean, it's going to be a blast like last year, I'm sure.
This is a little unusual. Usually when I do live streams, I go on monologues about whatever topics I have, and now I have like absolutely no notes prepared, although you could certainly talk about present events if you wanted to. Yeah, I mean, I think I don't exactly know. The problem is I've been very busy this month and I haven't exactly been keeping up on the planning side of things. But my talk is 75% done, and I'm looking forward to meeting all the people there. It was a huge networking opportunity last year, and I'm hoping that we're going to replicate that this year and take it a step further. Obviously, the big development on my side from the first event was getting a lot more involved in basket weaving events. And I don't know if you've had a chance to participate in that project since last year, but
No, most of what I've been working on is I'm in Exit Group, and I've been doing a bunch of stuff on that side in terms of kind of like developing myself. I'm a tradesman. I don't know if you know much about me. It was a miracle they even let me speak, like
well, I know you're in the Exit Group.
Yeah, I'm just doing that, kind of helping other guys out, having that kind of fraternal order of helping your fellow man out, and that's been kind of my main focus here for a little bit, as well as trying to foster more manufacturing independence. That's a lot of what my talk is going to be about, is habits of mind for kind of preserving things. The working title of my speech is Anarchic Preservation, and it's going to go over the theoretical basis of Baudrillard, Jean Baudrillard, Cody Wilson, and some supporting concepts from other thinkers. And it's all about habits of mind, about how small groups of people can tackle projects and make that a symbolic exchange with power in the theory of Baudrillard. And so that's I've been bouncing between that.
Who's the other person other than Baudrillard? You said
Cody Wilson. He is the forefather of 3D printed guns. Yes, no. Well,
that's quite a combination there, right?
Yeah,
the
Cody,
sort of late 20th century French. I don't know what you consider Baudrillard. He's, I can't pronounce his name. Is he postmodernist, or he's some late 20th century French philosopher?
I don't know. I would not say he was a postmodernist, because like in the last book he wrote before he died, Fatal Strategies, there's some there's basically Groyper quotes in there.
Like, oh no, really?
Like a right-wing anon. He's got one quote from there that says, Hispanics are literally cannibalizing the U.S. That is a quote from the last book he wrote before he died. Like he is such an interesting thinker to me, and I've been trying to complete my collection of his works here lately. I mean, I've got 2 stacks on, like, I've got books everywhere. It's horrible. Like, they're just stacked up everywhere. But
No, I'm so far behind on my reading list. It's not funny. It's just
yeah.
life. Wait till you're. I mean, I don't know if you're married and have kids, but if you're married and have kids, it gets a lot more complicated to find time to read and all that stuff.
Yeah, I'm not so lucky.
Well, I'm sure you'll get there, but it is. I've kind of lamented the fact that I haven't read as much as I kind of caught up on it during the COVID years, and then I fell back behind again.
Yeah.
And now there's this too many books for me to read and not enough time, and I feel like I'm behind on everything. But that's great. I think that the thing is here is this is going to be a topic. As always, the theme kind of emerges. There's always a theme to these Scyldings conferences, and then the theme is whatever people write speeches for. And usually, you discover the theme after you actually get back from the conference. Yeah. So, but one thing though I think is just going to be kind of evergreen is just how to properly manage the right-wing community organizing dimension of things. Yeah. This is something that's been a problem, not a problem, but it's something that trying to balance just quality control with numbers and the problem of locality, because you want an enormous number of people so that you can get people meeting up in real life in every single locality, but you want to keep the quality very, very high. So there's this controlled rate of growth that you have to maintain and not force it.
Right.
But this is gonna be something that we're discussing. I don't think there'll be a talk about it. Maybe there will be, but we'll be talking in between the talks a lot about this logistic problem that we're all suffering from right now.
If I could proffer an analogy, this sounds a lot to me like there's kind of 3 stages of the techno-optimist, right? And your video about Linus Torvalds, and I just love that video so much. I'm a Linux nerd, so of course.
Oh yeah, I'm too.
I was like, oh man, this is so good. So I've listened to it like 3 times over. But I see the techno-optimist as like stage 1, the actual founding of Silicon Valley, and people not being able, or they engineered a use case for technology, did not think about side effects. Stage 2, the second generation, was the cypherpunks think very hard about byproducts of the technology they were building, but could not balance that with the original intended use case. Right? They just said, are these pros and cons worth putting the technology out? Yes. Okay. These are the consequences. I'm okay with that. And then stage 3, the third generation of techno-optimists, which I think are the people that have the most significant impact on the modern world. Technology, I think, has been the most shaping influence on this. Is something like figuring out this moderation between like community management. Is it small versus big? Network effect, like managing network effects. Like we want all the benefits of network effects. Like, so this is generation 1 techno-optimism. We want to have the intended use case of all the good of having a large network effect on the right, but we also don't want all of the negatives that come along with that. And finding a good balance, I think, is going to be difficult. And I tend to be a small group organizer kind of thinker. I think small insurgent teams will be better in the long run, and will probably protect the larger network of the right better, in case small, so we're going to get burned in the end. I think at least some of us,
What do you mean burned in the end?
I think that at least some people, the state is going to decide an exception on and say, well, we see it with January 6th. Like, you're just going to go away forever. You're too much of a headache. I think that the elites that we currently have will take some opportunity, if anyone is a node in the right-wing network, right, that is cutting a little bit too close or gaining too much power. I think they're at the grasping at straws at the end. As the decline gets worse, You
Well, I
know,
mean, they've already kind of done that to a certain extent, right?
sure.
And I mean, I don't think we can win social media. That's something that we all learned that in 2020, if not before that.
Right.
So I'm going to bring another person in here. Oh, but I wanted to ask you, though, did you read Morgoth's excellent Substack article about the great moving away?
No, I've been falling behind on everything. Yeah,
Oh,
I
well,
Substack.
I mean, apparently not your book reading, so I should probably be reading less Substack and more actual books. But he did an excellent. Oh, I don't even know if it was an essay, but he did a video essay about how people are detaching from the concept of social media. That social media began by being a way to kind of represent your real life relationships digitally in the form of Facebook. And then Facebook fell away because it did the parasocial thing less efficiently than did its direct rivals like Twitter and Instagram, where you were just a completely virtualized entity until finally, after COVID, it seems like we might be burning out. People want deep connections, but they also don't want to leave behind their values. And this is in some sense, and I'm not saying we're the only people trying to do this, but this is in some sense what the model of basket weaving has to strive towards. We're trying to essentially put the genie back in the bottle. I know like that you're not supposed to do that, but that's the sort of the idea, right? The idea is to essentially try to unravel the giant Gordian knot that is modern social media. But anyway, one more person here. We have Esso. So I'm going to try to keep it down to 4 people. So once we have 4 people, I might ask someone to leave if more people are lining up behind you, if that's all right. Esso, how are you doing? Can you hear
I'm
us?
good. Thank you for having me on. Am I coming through all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent. Okay. So I think this is my first time on a stream. So I'll just say, hey guys, I'm Iso. So I'm also going to be speaking down at the Scyldings event.
Nice.
I mean, I'm one of the guys that has been working for the Beowulf Foundation.
Excellent.
And
well,
so we're
I'm a huge fan of the Beowulf Foundation's work so far.
Oh, thank you.
I always have to appreciate all the people who are just the unsung heroes that aren't like they aren't running the social media accounts because they did get underappreciated, criminally underappreciated. So,
no, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's fun, certainly. And so that's sort of what I want to like talk to people about down at the event there, right? I mean, like my speech is going to be focused more on how do you actually go about like building an organization, because that's sort of what what I've actually gotten some experience with working with these guys, because I know that there's a lot of people who when they go down to these events, they come out of it with a lot of energy.
Then they end up talking to Sargon of Akkad and the energy.
Yeah, something like that.
I remember that was the exact moment that there was this moment. Well, it was in early spring last year when everyone was really hyped from the last conference. And then they decided to talk to Sargon, and it was like hitting a giant brick wall. I really appreciate Sargon; he's a great guy, but just the conversation went absolutely nowhere.
Oh, I love him. He, I'm one of the many people who got my start listening to Sargon of Akkad back in the day.
No, we all did. I mean, that was I don't know if I got my start listening to Sargon of Akkad. I think, strangely enough, Rod Dreher is probably the person who radicalized me. Yeah. Oh, I copied this one, the wrong link. Sargon, the 2 people who kind of are more responsible for my channel are the Franklin, who used to blog under a different name, and Sargon of Akkad. And they had this interaction back in the day where they're 2 of my favorite vloggers, and the Franklin just completely lost his shit at Sargon. It was like in 2015, before I started vlogging, and it was completely nuts. And I thought to myself, I really could. I think I might have some input here. I think I could kind of square this circle, so to speak. So, anyway, what's your talk on?
Yeah. I mean, mine is on like the practical aspects of organization, right?
Okay, so it literally is like a how-to. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
interesting. That's great.
Well, it's because like I find that a lot of, I mean, everybody talks about the need for organization, especially since everyone started getting into elite theory, right? I mean, it is the number one thing that you need to do if you want to, engage with the political in any serious sense. But a lot of the talk about it, like it's sort of like the difference between economics and investing in finance, right? Like the talk about organization tends to be on the more esoteric side. Um, like I'm sure that probably half of the audience, or maybe even more than that, could write a very solid essay on like the principles of like political organization, but how many people would actually know how to apply that in the real world? It's a very different thing, and it's one of those things that I'm going to do my best to sort of give people the knowledge that I've learned, both through the experience with it that I've got from Beowulf, and also the mentorship I've had from the people in the organization. Um, but some of it is also just going to have to come down to like learning it through practice, because it's
Yeah,
it,
I'm my ambition is to write a basket weaving manual or handbook in a year or so, kind of extending it from the rules for friends posts that I haven't put together yet, because I really do think people need to have some guide to how to organize in real life, because
oh,
there are certain things
absolutely.
that work and certain things that don't work, and I think everyone's learning them. And I mean, when you say organizing, do you mean specifically organizing people who are online friends who are trying to
Um,
meet up in real life, or what particularly?
I mean, I'm going to try and cover sort of both doing it in the digital realm and in the real world. Um, like obviously the goal is to eventually have things be primarily in the real world. I'm a firm believer in that. Uh, but we do have to transition into that state. And so from now until then, at least some parts of it, I mean, we're never going to entirely get away from the digital, because we have to be international in nature at all
Yeah,
times. Like
absolutely.
there's no, there's just no way around that, right? So
There's no
we're
way
never
we
going
can
to,
do that.
yeah. So we're
Absolutely.
never going to entirely escape that. So I'm hoping to cover both aspects of it. I have some actually very interesting things about the sort of organizing in the real world. Um, I mean, I've spent a lot of time recently talking to people from our basket weaving community, to try and sort of get them in on a project to,
Mm.
build out these networks further into the real world. And just the quality of some of the people that I've spoken with is like, it's truly exceptional.
Yeah, it
Um,
is nice. It is very good.
um, Especially within basket weaving, which is why I sort of encourage everybody to go out and get involved with that as much as possible, because you really are like, getting out and meeting those people really is one of the most key things that you can do right now.
It is, and it's just a matter also of scale, because when you're in my position in life, it's sometimes a little hard to really get away for an evening, right? So the more
Yeah,
local it can be, the more effective it will eventually become. But that's excellent, and I probably could talk a lot more about this. I'm going to add one more person to the stream.
perfect.
But this is Prudentialist. How's it going?
Hello.
Hey, looking
Happy to
very,
be
very
here.
dapper. Yeah,
Well,
I'm looking
thank you.
like a bum here.
I was on the air earlier, so I figured I'd just stay
Oh,
dressed.
okay. Oh, wow. Yeah, there you go. You were with Geo. You had the podcast today, right?
Yes. Digital Archipelago, always fun on Thursdays. But it's nice
Oh, yeah.
to speak with Micah, Paul, and Esso. I'm happy to meet the new people that are speaking instead of us guys that are second time going.
I'm
Oh
very
my
happy to
God.
speak with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I feel very, very old right now. And it's kind of funny seeing the community evolve in this way. It really is. And I don't know. I'm kind of feeling better about a lot of things. I think 2023 kind of started off as a very dour year. It felt like reality was being destroyed in many ways, and now I think we're seeing kind of reality kind of, I mean, I'm not going to say that the problems have disapparated at all, but it just demonstrates that at the end of the day, what's going to change the world are people just doing things, just actually taking incremental steps forward. And the rest of the whole clown show is going to move around and break shit and make a huge ruckus, but you know, we just have to keep on taking those incremental steps forward. That's all there is to it. I mean, today, not to ramble, but today I think my wife pulled up this horrible stabbing video from France, and it basically shook her for the rest of the day because it was literally like children getting stabbed. But I don't want to sound like cold or anything. I don't want to sound cruel, but I wasn't really even shaken by the stabbings. It was just this one scene in this video where there's this grown man. There's this guy that's stabbing kids, and this grown man just he in the background he goes down the kids slide and then runs away. And I mean, it's this surreal clown world moment, and I don't know. I couldn't shake that from my memory, but to sort of get back onto track, I guess. I think it is just at the end of the day about making sure that you're better suited for this world and taking incremental steps forward. Prudentialist, you're doing a talk this year, right? What is your talk about?
I am. So I kind of wanted to address the theme of the event more head on, and so for starters, my speech will be actually written this time. If you were if you attended last year, you'll notice I gave a 20-minute impromptu talk from a note card, but. So to give the writers of the event book less crap, I wrote my talk down. But I wanted to address the question head on because everyone from the earliest from the apostles to even more recently other Christians such as yourself, Dave, had mentioned that we really are in a war of belief, and that's just a fundamental truth. And so all of these beliefs, these first principles, formulate a political formula, or as Schmidt would call it, political theology. I'm a big fan of what Dr. Henry Hopwood Phillips once wrote. He said that bad theology makes for bad realities. And so I want to address the question head on about, can we formulate these foundations with all these differing political theologies? Where are their baselines? Where can we get to? And address what that might look like for, Christians, non-Christians, and so on in the United States.
You say, I wrote the title of my talk basically as a follow-up for last year's talk, like a sequel, and I called it The Tales of Winter, and I thinking that next year when I delivered it would be winter, but it's no longer winter. But no, it works actually very much in the same theme. I don't even really know what the theme this year is.
Forging a common foundation.
Forging a common foundation. I will put this right now in the actual link. But that's interesting. Yeah, I think that I think Charlemagne is speaking on a very similar topic as well. This is something that I don't know. I mean, what were your thoughts from last year's conference?
Well, it was exciting because it felt as if once everyone was in person, almost all bits of internet squabbling and petty bullshit kind of just dropped by the wayside. And I thought that was the most refreshing thing, is that once you get everyone in a room together, a lot of that side tickle slapping stuff kind of gets put to the wayside. But so much optimism and networking came from it, where you got the start of the Old Glory Club really came out of last year's event. And I think people had really wanted, like you had said, the desire to crank up basket weaving by a factor of 11, which, that's only the beginning of the Beowulf Foundation. But last year you had all these differing ideas about, well, where are we in terms of numbers? Who are we? And how much of our relationship to the digital does there need to be in order to keep functioning? And so I think that when we discuss foundations, I think people have a pretty good idea of what they want to do or what they think needs to be done. And so it's always nice to hear these things come to pass. But when I think about last year's event and what's happened in a year and a half since, it's really been more so of, well, we got together. There's a refreshing feeling of camaraderie, I think, for Americans especially. This was right before the war in Ukraine started. So everyone was kind of dowered over the fact that Biden's in the White House and things weren't looking so great. The economy was in the crapper. still.
Yeah, and that
is.
was just when Trudeau crushed the truckers'
Yep,
protest.
just when Trudeau crushed the truckers. So everyone was
I mean,
kind of
it feels like a
down and out.
decade ago at this stage, doesn't it? It feels like can you? I mean, I guess it was more than a year technically, but
Yeah,
it feels like way more than a year.
Oh,
since the end of the
if you want to
protest.
feel old, go. I had the YouTube algorithm show me Sargon's VidCon 2017 video, and it was the Anita Sarkeesian Ben Garrison cartoon of him calling her or her calling him a trash human being, and I was like, this is a century ago, this is a millennia ago, and it's from 2017, which is like what 5-6 years ago now. Like, ugh. So yeah, it definitely does feel like forever. But I think that with how basket weaving is going, with the Beowulf Foundation, with all these new people coming in as well, I feel like the takeaway from last year to this year, and presumably the year after, will really be how networked are we and how connected are we? Because, you know, we've witnessed doxings, we've witnessed firings. I mean, the exit, you know, we've seen that already with Bennett's phylactery. It really does illustrate that we need to have our shit together when things do get bad. And between the Old Glory Club, New Founding, Exit, and other organizations like the Beowulf Foundation, I mean, that really needs to be our goal.
Yeah, I mean, the key is going to be to have a common set of. I know this is managerial gobbledygook speak, and in many ways the form of our destroyer, but a form of kind of best practices or customs that distinguishes people that we want to associate with from people that we have to distance ourselves from. Because as we ramp up the size of these in real life events, we are going to have to encounter the problem of quality control at some stage. And once more, you know, we can't win parasocial. It's amazing you mentioned Sargon's conflict with Anita Sarkeesian, because a few weeks ago, I got a video from a channel I forgot I subscribed to by Jonathan McIntosh's, you know, Anita Sarkeesian's little Svengali, you know, the person who wrote all their stuff. He's still producing videos, and he was a joke. I mean, and just to kind of give you an idea, I mean, the guy, despite he did a video on solar punk, like the Shobani commercial that I used as sort of a inspiration for my previous one, right? And like the thing, he has like 1 million subscribers, and he has nothing interesting to say, but he has 1 million subscribers, and his the videos get thousands and thousands and thousands of views, right? This just gives you an understanding of the size of the parasocial network that the left has, and it's not something that we can really compete with. But with all that power, their ability to actually get creative forces in the room that actually has something interesting to say is minimal. My wife was looking at the Babylon Bee, and she was cracking up at like a bunch of their jokes, and they've gotten a lot better. And I realized that their jokes weren't even political. There was one about Elon Musk landing a Mars rover in the middle of New York, because if you look outside right now, if you live where I do, it basically looks like you're on Mars. And it was a funny joke. And then I realized that The Onion, the go-to fake news site that had been the millennials, one of the core millennial comedy properties for the last 20 years, all of their jokes are just stale. And they're not even like, it's not even like I'm a conservative, I don't like them bashing Republicans. I'm just saying that their jokes just don't land. They're all just political tirades with a little bit of a rim shot at the end or something like that. So I mean, this just kind of shows you that this is a step that needs to happen. I don't know. I'm going to add some more people in. I know I only said 4, but I'm going to add the people in. Okay. All right. So we have Jay Ford and we have David Wayne. How's it going, guys?
Hey, what's up?
I probably should have added you one at a time. Anyway, are you guys both attending the conference, or how's it going?
So I know I am, and I attended last time as well. David was there as well.
I'm attending as well.
Oh, cool. Well, I guess I should just ask you on your general thoughts about our organization, our goals for this next year, what we want to see at the conference, so on and so forth.
Well, it's interesting to me that we're all realizing that we need to get this common foundation thing down and stapled down like as soon as possible, just because the thing that's been going on for like the past 2, 3, 4 years is that on the right side of things, we are all saying like, oh, we don't actually have anything in common. It's just cool to me that we're actually at the point where we're now like, yes, we need to figure something out. We'll try to get something coming together. And I mean, last year, Turnip had an excellent talk about, the quote-unquote confederacy model. I wouldn't use that term, but it's still one that, sort of sits in the back of my mind when it comes to organizational things. And I mean, there's a saying that basically in business where it's like, well, if you want something and you're not seeing it, then you have to go build it yourself. And I think that that's going to be one of the things that a lot of people who go to this conference and a lot of people who are actually looking to become more active in communities would be looking to. Like for me, for instance, I have been largely inactive. I haven't done my reading or my Substack reading, but it reminds me of one of Prudentialist's old videos where he said, I hadn't even begun to fight. And so now you see like the organization is actually ramping up to do that. So I think it's
that video is like from right after Biden's inauguration. That feels like a million years ago.
Biden has been president for what, 3 years now?
He
right?
feels like
or
a
less.
second-term president. Like, honestly, I guess that's just an effect of him being senile.
Yeah,
and he
I'll
feels
add
like
on-
a second-term president, but I don't. I think the probability of a Republican victory is actually probably below 40%. But
and I'll add on to your build it yourself kind of ethos, Mr. Ford. My talk is going to be focused more on small actors, fire teams, four-man squads. What can you do? What is an effective habit of mind? So you can effectively dissect one single issue that you want to preserve some good in the world. Okay, how do you have a good frame of reference to go into this issue? What are some practical considerations from some of the thinkers I'm drawing from that talk? Because I think my position on the thesis of the conference is, well, some men will have to stand alone. I mean, can we have 1 million people in Exit and Beowulf and New Founding? And, I'm hoping that gets to be the case. But for those who do not find their way in these things and finding the hierarchy and want to try to be a mover and shaker, I think there is a path for people to build something themselves and actually have almost like a liberative politics sort of idea of like, how can I liberate the conservative individual, the right-wing individual, so to speak, from the hell world that we live in. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on more. So I'm going to be excited to see you again. Me and Ford are in some of the same discords. And so I'm excited to see you again, Mr. Ford.
I'm not, when it comes to Ryan, it's funny because he talked about developing a confederation model, but the struggle that he's involved with right now is almost more interesting with his own Lutheran church or some leadership in his own Lutheran church. And this is, we're going to have to cross this bridge sooner rather than later. We need to have nominally conservative organizations not police us from the left. That needs to be something. I mean, obviously, I'm not saying that they shouldn't enforce orthodoxy or that the point is just to be as right-wing as possible and you shouldn't care about Christian considerations. But if you're speaking from a position of orthodoxy, we need to have nominally conservative organizations not be the hallway monitors of the establishment, because I'm sure that will happen, but to the extent that it does, there needs to be a pathway forward where it's understood that we hold the line against forces like that, because that is really where that is really where it hurts, is when nominally or ostensibly allied organizations become a function of the establishment. I've left you guys speechless. But anyway.
I think Ryan's confederalism model, I think it is, probably the only, or at least something very similar to it is probably the only way we could get, everyone to work together properly. I mean, the theme of this event is forging a common foundation, and I mean, as far as that goes, right? I'm fairly certain that there is sort of already a common foundation between the people that will be in attendance. I mean, otherwise they would really be going. And yet there's sort of still drama. I don't, there's never going to be a way to really make everybody actually agree with each other, especially when some of these, disagreements are things that are as fundamental as, as religion, right? I mean, they're
Yeah,
both.
Well, I
Christians
can
and
speak to
pagans.
that, right? I mean, right after I got back from the Scyldings conference, I got into this like 2-month long conflict with the online pagans that was completely fruitless. And this is just not where we should be putting our effort. I think that I came to some observations about that, but I do not think that there is a serious religious debate on the right wing right now. I think there is a serious sense of religious seeking and religious wanting and religious desire. But I do not think that there is some kind of, we're not saying it's something like the 30 Years' War, where the full force of post-Trent Catholicism is fighting the full force of primordial Protestantism. That's not occurring. What's happening is a lot of lost people are frustrated and they're counter-signaling each other, and they're not looking to fight so much as to find some organization that has their back. And I think it's really more of a question of where are the adults in the room that can kind of take these people who are seeking spiritual fulfillment and organize them in the way where they're able to find that spirituality in a productive and non-destructive way. We are not in the middle of a holy war right now, especially not in the middle of the right, except potentially a holy war against the religion of sort of deracinated progressivism, against the religion of the cathedral. In that sense, there is a religious war, but there's no religious war on the right at all, as far as I can tell.
I would go ahead, Esso.
No, sorry, you can speak.
Oh, I would just agree with Dave there wholeheartedly. I think that really the only sort of religious conflict you have is against the spirit of the age, and that I'm actually in my talk, I kind of just take Turnip's model for granted because I think it's just been de facto, it's just explained itself kind of adamantly. If you look at sort of the online right-wing space, like everyone has their own sort of cliques and camps and cults of personality that they follow. And so, you kind of, like Charlemagne says this all the time in chats where he talks about like to people who are up and coming. And I don't mean to insult those that want to get started or to do things, but he's very adamant about people where he's just like, pick somebody and follow them, because there's not going to be a million Tucker Carlsons out there. There's not going to be a million academic agents or distributists out there. We wish everyone is based as these people, right? But it's not, you're not going to get to that for everybody. So I think that it will really be able to, can we have common foundations along these certain lines? I think that's true. Or is it probably going to be confederal? Yes. But can we agree on like 5 or 10 baseline things? And thankfully, Dave, you've done a lot of the heavy lifting in that respect, whether it's your friend's thread or how to be right wing in 9 points. Like there's a lot there to work off of. And I think that there's still a lot to work off of when it comes to addressing how do we organize or how do we get ourselves situated to deal with what to me seems like a very long battle against what is like this is the thing with like liberalism in America, because it always attends to like the outsider groups. So whether it's like new immigrants from like the Middle East or just like newly disaffected people that are getting their first sort of like sinecures and jobs like that, like they'll abandon anything for that, to a point where I was reading a Pew Research poll, and this is in my last video I did, where it was saying more American Muslims in the United States are pro-homosexuality than white evangelicals. And like that's the spirit of the age right there, is telling you who's willing to give up their beliefs and principles for Gibbs and for feeling the warm fuzzy being on the right side of history. And I feel like that'll be a big thing to consider in the future.
When you engage with the left, you have to ask yourself who are the real true believers. And the thing is that I think that there are a few groups who are genuine left-wing true believers. The people who are on the trans bandwagon are true believers. There are a few racial identity groups that are true believers, but for the most part, 90% of the leftist coalition is 100% opportunistic. and I don't know. I think it actually is more than it was 10 years ago. I think the number of people who actually believe there is a future in this stuff was actually greater in 2013 than it is now, despite the fact that the ostensible and visible power extended by the left is much, much higher now. When I see people like, there is this whole thread that, who did this thread? It was I can't remember, but someone did an excellent thread on the NPC, and the NPC is distinguished, and people, they use it sloppily previously, in the sense that they were conflating it with just anybody who is stupid or misinformed, who was on the left or allied with the mainstream. But in reality, the NPC is a certain kind of usually white guy, usually some white midwit, who's just convinced that the only way is just kind of chill out about everything, man. It doesn't affect you. How does this affect you personally? And just to sort of keep the gravy train going on our present reality of Marvel movies and iPhone goggles. I mean, has anyone see that commercial for iPhone goggles?
Yes.
You see, I couldn't. I was laughing through the entire thing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's such. It already is. It was a pastiche the second they released that commercial. It's the same. Like, it's the same vision of these sort of yuppie type mid-30s characters in some kind of super renovated home with incomes that are kind of impossible for that demographic group unless you're working at, you know, a relatively high up position in Silicon Valley. And he takes out his like iPhone product and he treats it like this miracle, and you've got this upbeat, optimistic late 70s jam playing in the background about being a dreamer. And what is it? It's an iPhone that's pressed up against your eyes. And the selling point is you can be more involved with your family by literally taking your phone and smashing it into your face.
See,
Brilliant.
I mean,
You know,
it makes in a very real sense, it's
brilliant.
perfect.
Yeah, it's like you.
Like
who's buying this? Who's buying this?
The true believers. Like
yeah, exactly.
there was literally a study that found that that when they scanned the brains of Apple fans, when they saw Apple logos, they saw similar brain activation as religious believers do in worship services.
Oh no! Oh no!
Oh, they know this though. Like, go back to the Mark Zuckerberg thing. Turn customers into fanatics, products into obsessions, employees into ambassadors, and brands into religions.
It's so bizarre because I was kind of cut out of a lot of the early, because my family loved me. I was cut out of a lot of the my generation's first introduction to Web 2.0, 1.0, and all the optimism therein. So when I go back and watch like Steve Jobs introduce the iPhone for the first time, you can tell he's a true believer of the old school variety where he genuinely just loves that he made a really well-made product.
Yeah. Oh, you poor summer children. You have
And-
no knowledge of what it's like to be an older millennial, do you? I don't only remember that period. I remember being one of those people. In that, I mean, and, you know, the thing is here is we were talking a little bit about being Linux fans with Micah Pohl. And, you know, I mean, at least say what you will about the cult of Stallman and Torvalds, but at least there's an ethos there. And in the Apple thing, the ethos was, hey, it's sleek and easy to use, and it's this great consumer product. There wasn't even some kind of story about how humanity would be liberated by owning their own information.
There is a deeper story attached to it. Walter Isaacson, in his very excellent book, The Innovators, the story of the geniuses that made the modern world, talks about how there was this grand vision of the personal computer that predates Steve Jobs. But Steve Jobs kind of grew up in that Silicon Valley vision of the notion of the personal computer, and that's like that kind of informed his entire design philosophy, and that was the original ethos. That's one of the reasons why Steve Wozniak, you know, the arch nerd that would actually be, he probably is actually, I don't know this for certain, but he almost certainly would be friends with a guy like Linus Torvalds.
They seem like similar characters to me, certainly.
Because I know, like, Wozniak has actually spoken out for like rights to repair, so that kind of like overlaps with the whole free software movement. But anyway, there's a reason why Wozniak, besides just wanting to get his tech out, paired up with Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs is kind of like the aesthetic idealization of what free software, right to repair, being able to manifest in the realm of the atoms what it is in the realm of bits and memes and whatnot. That is the perfect actualization of yourself and your total will. And in the case of Apple, it's through this seamless ability to not actually have to have any friction in how you use your technology as you want.
But I'll add on something here for sure, because the free software type of ethos it has a certain different type of individuating process now. Like,
yeah, it's a do-it-yourself process. That's what makes it, it's less of a consumer. Pardon me, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, that is true on the one hand. On the pure technology side, yes, you are 100% correct. But the open source ethos, in terms of what the most cutting edge of it is now, is something like the more object than object, as Baudrillard puts it, the way of distributing things by other means. So, for instance, like I come from GunCAD, I'm a 3D gun printer guy, and that's how I ended up here through a very weird roundabout way. But that's kind of where I see that going, is what can you distribute something that is something of import in a different way. And so, like, this open source, like DIY kind of way of doing things, like I can envision a process where distributed manufacturing means, as they are coming down in cost, like 3D printers, CNC machines, desktop lathes, all that stuff. Like, this is kind of my area of expertise, and something I've been working on quite hard in my own, business I'm starting up. It looks as though there is something there for us to harness as well, to steal some DNA from this, like, liberative individuating process of open source. Like, the promise of open source can still be, like, delivered, I would even say, directly to the right wing, in a process of distributing products and things as pure information, what Pirate Bay called physibles, right? It's not physical, it's not digital, it's somewhere in between. It's ready for manufacture. So if we could do that for wood gasification generators, because green energy taxes are about to come, like they're about to come, or smart meters, that sort of thing. Like, any bypass of kind of the technocratic control is something it's a more anarchy praxis sort of thing. But I can see a potential for the right wing harnessing this kind of ethos in order to move forward, and also, like, insulate ourselves from some amount of control from the regime. I don't know if that makes sense to everyone else, but that's kind of where I've been thinking here recently.
I mean, that does make a lot of sense. I think that the problem is, and this is something that I think Alex Kashuda has brought up a lot recently, and that is that there is a great turning away. What did she say? That everyone is checking out was her original essay. And it was basically how everyone's focused on men checking out, but in reality, basically everyone's checking out. And the reason why everyone's checking out is we've realized, or at least the lockdowns have taught us, that at a certain level, for a certain minimal status in life, we don't need each other anymore. And this lack of need has created a way that people can eternally retire from reality if they don't like it. This is essentially moving against this trend is going to have to be the core of everything we do going forward. It's going to have to be a re-embracing of community in a deep way, and using the internet as a tool for that. So I think that this idea of distributing technology or distributing know-how through the internet and making that sort of making homesteading sort of a downloadable app, if you will, that's something that's promising to a certain extent, but I think that the main thing is going to be cultivating an attitude where you understand that your worth extends from your community and not from your pro-felicity, and that your needs as a human being go beyond what your iPhone can deliver or what you can get from your UBI at your local grocery store. Because this is the thing Alex points out. We have all these women who are just never going to get married at this stage, but it's actually kind of unlikely that they're all going to arrive at this mea culpa moment and kind of be the too much too late, I should say, the penitent cat lady, if you will, who too late comes to the realization that what they wanted was a family. This is not going to happen because people are they have the option to be inoculated, to be kind of separated from reality continuously by their devices and by their fandoms and by the digital reality that we all occupy. And so we're going to have to exist in a world where if we want something that's more than that, we're going to have to make a conscious effort to actually build it and achieve it. And so technology is going to have to act as something secondary to that goal.
Yeah, it definitely is going to be interesting to see how things kind of balance out, because like as much as I like open source, there's something in the DNA of the philosophy of the community that makes it hard to utilize for the purposes of practice, praxis, for the adoption by like normal people. Like I remember listening to Eli the Computer Guy talk about how he was trying to learn.
You're not teaching your grandmother Vim. Come on.
He's trying to like read or learn like Red Hat or something like that. And this guy talked about like the superior, how GUIs were a gauche basically. It's like, dude, what? He's just like the whole there is basically there is a point for why you have a certain amount of centralization built into software systems, and more importantly, social structures that necessarily require certain balancing elements that allow for the cultivation of healthy community. Like one striking comment from like the life of Richard Stallman was about how when he was like 15 in high school, he refused to join like this trivia competition where him and his classmates were split apart, and he said it was because I could see that we were being divided against each other, that people were previously my friends were were being pitted against each other. Like, dude, like can you not compute how this is like play is fundamentally a part of negotiation and community building, and one of those, and how that extends back up. I'm sorry if I'm rambling a bit.
No, it's fine. I never knew that. That sounds exactly like the arch autist Stallman himself. Exactly the kind of thing I'd associate with him. But keep on going.
But basically, my point is like you need this like negotiated balance between centralization and conflict, and that help essentially get rid of clutter to a certain degree within community, like social entropy. And that can manifest in various different forms, from like in some cases like literal war, not advocating or anything like that, just that's what happens, or in the case of like competition of in the marketplace of economics and such, to the more decentralized. It allows for the commonweal to develop in many respects. Very good things. That's one of the things that Linux has actually been very good for. It is the most downloaded OS in the world because of that reason, because you can just strip away anything. At the same time,
I will say this at the risk of getting the stream taken down. I realize that Linux and Magic the Gathering have one thing in common: is that they're kind of a collaboration between one Gentile and one Jewish creator. one which kind of provides a design element, and one which provides sort of a vision element. I mean, in very similar ways. But I think that's kind of entertaining, though.
I mean, the two greatest director film score combos of the past 50 years have been both Jewish Gentile pairings.
well, there you go. That was neither here nor there. But I found that entertaining just thinking of it off the cuff. But anyway, guys. So with 6 of you on, I definitely violated my rule with only having 4, but I have no problem. It doesn't seem like we're having a hard time managing this. Although if another person wants, there have been a few people who've asked to come on, so it might get unmanageable at some point.
Well, I need to hop out, Dave. So
okay, cool.
We've got more room.
Yeah.
I just want to say I look forward to meeting most of y'all at the event in a couple of weeks. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, Dave. And be sure to buy your tickets. If the links aren't in the description, go do it. I did a little stream earlier, and I was doing the American Huckster type deals. I think you're doing
buy the tickets. Buy the tickets. Buy the tickets.
Buy now.
Buy now. Operators are standing by. Scyldings operators. You dial now. Go to Scyldings.com/events. Purchase your tickets now. Operators are standing by. We look forward to seeing you there. God bless and take care, everyone.
All right, take care.
Take care,
see you, Prudentialist. So I have to actually write the last 3% of my essay and practice it a few times because
same.
I always write these things way too long, and sometimes they give me a little extra time because I'm verbose on these things, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun. Yeah.
What would be interesting is if you release an extended version after the conference. That's always interesting. You take your first draft where you wanted to go on like a large rant on. I don't know.
I don't think you can. I don't think that's well. I think that if there are certain rules about us releasing essays that we give at these events, in full at least, publicly, because there needs to be a certain incentive to come.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's hard because we're for most of us here, we're working day jobs. We have families. Our time for content creation is somewhat limited, but no, it's important to make sure that the things you really pour your heart and soul on go out to an audience that's ready to hear them, and that it's special for them to hear that. And I've become more and more aware of the fact that our communications need to be focused on creating an intimate experience for the people who are really ready to hear them, as opposed to just going out to a general audience. That's just what we've seen from, I mean, this is something that Morgoth brought up, so it's not just my own obsession, but I mean, you look at what's happened to BreadTube, it's a travesty. It's a travesty. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy, and in many ways they are my worst enemies. But what they have become are drama shows with political flavoring, with no pretension of actually changing anything, with no pretension of actually building anything. That's all the left has become. It's drama with a political flavor. It's comedy with a political flavor. And that's the last thing that I want to be. I want to actually give messages to people where they can say, I heard this message and it actually had an impact on my life and it got me to think in a different way. Not this was the podcast I put on in the background while I did a 3-hour gaming stream or a 3-hour gaming session or whatever.
It's funny you mentioned that, because recently Justin Murphy dropped a video that was very interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with him. His name is blown up a couple times in our spheres because he I think the one that
remember his collaboration with Molebug.
Yeah, he did a collaboration with Molebug a while back. He's
Based to Lose. I think I bought that book. Yeah.
Nick Land interview with Mr. Murphy was excellent.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Also, he is going all in on Urbit. I'm actually on his server for that. But
oh, nice.
But on Twitter, like for example, one of the things that blew up is he was lamenting his loss of freedom to a certain degree as a result of becoming a dad.
Oh yeah, I remember that. That was an infamous tweet.
Yeah,
because everyone jumped on him for that, which I think there was a cultural miscommunication, because I'm pretty sure he comes from one of these Bay Area or Portland.
Oh yeah,
area.
yeah. He's like a
even more than I have, right? Even more than I am. And in those spheres, you're encouraged as a man to just say everything you're thinking like a confessional.
Yeah, that's what he said. That's the whole point of his Twitter. His Twitter is unfiltered thoughts. He's just thinking out loud. But
it's public.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, the video that he posted recently was very interesting and kind of encouraging as a guy who wants to get into the business of content creation, not as a business, but just to do it. Is he said that you should write only essentially without sorry, without any intended audience in mind besides yourself. Because, and he noted this because if you look back at a lot of famous authors in the past, they all write this, and that was kind of as a practical necessity of, well, you can't get any feedback from people when you're trying to when literally it's like your small village at most can hear what you're writing, and that's about it. There's no like literary circle of peers or anything like that. There's no big public masses, like notably until what was it? Lord Byron was the first rock star in that sense that was actually like a mass popular poet that became famous and got A/B
That's a good
testing.
analogy. Yeah, he got famous during his lifetime. But
Yeah.
I fundamentally disagree with this. I mean, the best videos I have made have been me making a video with somebody in mind. Like I want, like, there's a person who I need to tell a story to, and this is the person, and now I'm going to tell them a story, and by communicating this story to them, I'm going to be intimate. I'm going to be connected to them. That's why the story of my channel begins with Sargon of Akkad and reactionary expat, because the implicitly the messages of my channel were being addressed to Sargon of Akkad and his audience. Like, and then later on, they kind of became addressed to different people in my mind. And so I can't really imagine talking about a topic without thinking of the person that I'm talking to.
Is this why my music doesn't take off? Because I only make my music for myself, and then it doesn't do well when I release it. I mean, I'm like, well, fine.
if you're just doing numbers, Nickelback does make good money, but I guess maybe if you were to talk with him and dialogue and ask him about it, you probably, because he is an earnest Christian of a sort.
I didn't know he's a Christian. He's a Christian.
Yeah, apparently Catholic, influenced by. This is popular within tech circles to be to really be influenced by Girard, like Peter Thiel's Girardian Christian who allegedly believes in the actual resurrection of Christ, which is bizarre. I would expect him as a given his lifestyle, he would wade back into a non-supernaturalist account of Christianity, but strange things exist in this world.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm Justin Murphy is a hard person for me to parse, but I know he comes from the area of America that created me, so he's not a personality type that I'm unfamiliar with. He's just a personality type that I'm unfamiliar with being on the right wing.
Yeah.
But yeah.
If you were to dialogue him, I guess you could properly frame, you could probably draw out of him, and this is what I kind of took in terms of the wisdom, is that as a man, you cannot really ever write alone, even if you try to, because ultimately you still have the knowledge of God in the back of your mind, and everything that you're saying is actually going to be, you're going to have a certain level of account for, and so ultimately you're in some sense still dialoguing with God, even though you might sound like you're monologuing. And so you're either writing in a letter to someone, or writing to your pet heretic in the world of philosophy. When you're arguing something, you have a philosopher that you disagree with but like, so you kind of frame your arguments that way around to writing to said person from history, or ultimately, even if you truly are alone and you're just writing your last account and will and testament that you don't know anyone could possibly read, you ultimately have knowledge of eternity that's kind of ultimately framing the way and how you write about things. So
I should welcome to the stream Charlemagne. How's it going?
Hello. I figured I would just pop in and hang out.
Yeah, hey, welcome. You are also speaking at the event, and looking forward to hear your talk as well. I can sense that a lot of people are writing about this. Well, I guess this is the theme of the conference. I'm probably going to my speech not to this theme, but this is about how to. I don't know. I mean, maybe you could explain what your the general direction of your talk is, the general direction of your thought at this conference.
Well, I intended to talk about the Spanish Civil War a lot, but I ended up making that more of a side note. And I guess the main thing I'm talking about is how we have a mistaken view in a lot of ways about how many allies we have. I guess the main gist of my speech is that most of the people who are called Republicans or conservatives or Trump voters or whatever, they're just liberals. And the divide in America is between, maybe you could call some of them like racist liberals, to use the left's term. But really, liberalism is just everywhere, and there are very few people that actually share our values. And if you go to like the average, fairly right-leaning person in like the normal perspective, and you sort of tell them what you really want, they're going to turn against you, just like any leftist would. I experienced this quite a lot. Because, you know, most people just aren't willing to actually sacrifice any of their economic conditions for any higher value. So when you're like, you know, I don't think we should destroy some other country to lower the price of gas, they're going to get upset by that. Or when you're like, you should sacrifice, you know, you should potentially sacrifice your social standing and maybe put your career at risk to stop like other people from becoming, you know, trans or whatever, they're not going to be willing to do that because it doesn't affect them directly. And they can't actually comprehend that people like us would actually not have as our highest value, like preserving our economic conditions. So
this is interesting because you don't. I mean, what you're describing to me sounds like a very low class attitude, and one that, if it was put in juxtaposition with a more spiritually aware concept, would immediately look more squalid and would immediately look less high status. I don't know. I want to be like overly optimistic, but it seems that there might be some hope there, because I don't think that anyone really looks at. And we were talking about this archetype a few minutes before you got on, but the archetype of the midwit or the archetype of the NPC. You know, this is why I always found people like TJ the Amazing Atheist so much more disgusting than someone like Anita Sarkeesian or Jonathan McIntosh, because I can't say anything about Anita Sarkeesian. I think she's an opportunist, but Jonathan McIntosh is a true believer. He's a true believer in social justice, and I respect that. But TJ the Amazing Atheist and the rest of the NPC crowd, they just want to sit around and play the video and watch the Marvel movie and, you know, do the liberalism thing without any higher governing principle. To me, that's so much more squalid. And I don't know if we're necessarily. I think our sense that that's a squalid way to live is not going to be something that we are alone in feeling.
I just want to add, you know, anyone who has in earnest tried to red pill their father will feel the same way as I think Charlie does with, you know, our, which I have tried. And, you know, there's many things like, you know, especially the war in Ukraine. You know, me and my dad have conversations about this. I'm like, dude, this is horrible. It needs to stop right now. My dad was a Cold Warrior. My dad was was Army air defense artillery, and he's like, no, the Ruskies are our enemies. And I'm like, no, everything is bad here. You know, it's like you go through these conversations with people that you know, and my dad just gets kind of a sour face and just kind of like, well, let's talk about working. What are we going to build in the shop next weekend when you come over? You know, he just kind of gets a sour face and changes the conversation, and not so much to turn on you, but anyone else who wasn't your blood would immediately.
Yeah, but I think there's difference. There's two ways that I mean, what you're describing is sort of a common attitude, and I'm not trying to steal the thunder out of Charlemagne's idea, but it's amazing because Charlemagne hit on a element that I'll also be discussing at my talk, so you can see how these threads run together. It always feels like you're doing spoiler alerts when you do these pre-conference talks, because we're already discussing this idea. But I mean, there's two ways to get to this conclusion. The first way is you're your dad and you're a Cold Warrior, and you have this military tradition, this idea of America that is properly religious, that is healthy. And you're just running it. You're just running the same program on a set of data points that no longer match the program's operating assumptions. Whereas when you look at people like TJ Kirk, I mean, this person just wants to be a nihilist in a hug box. He wants to essentially get into the pod and just have stimulus, pardon me, pumped in. And that's a radically different. I mean, the conclusion's the same as your father's, but the way to get there is radically different, and ultimately they'll react radically differently when the chips are down, I would assume.
Well, even if you're not talking to a hardcore Cold Warrior type, I mean, mostly I talk to people my age about this who obviously can't be Cold Warriors by definition. And like a lot of what I see is that in terms of the aid being given to Ukraine, it's like the attitude is like, this is a great use of American resources because it just eliminates a geopolitical competitor, and by proxy it's going to make me richer, basically. And like, that's a really messed up view to have, to be like, yeah, it's fine to just, you know, fuel this war because it's going to destroy this thing we call a competitor, and that's going to make us rich. And, you know, maybe they might not necessarily be for like the war per se, but they're not really against it, and they're certainly not going to take a stand either way because it doesn't affect them directly. And this is basically the case with all the woke stuff too. I mean, a lot of what you see among people, you know, our millennial age is that they're really against the whole like concept of the far left, because the left is trying to tell them what to do, and they don't really oppose it from any like value position. And they oppose us basically the same way, because they wouldn't want us telling them what to do either. Like, because the fear is this buzzword authoritarianism. Like, the fear is like, if you start laying down the law on the far left, then it might mean that they might also lose their freedom of action. They might not be like, you know, trans or homosexual or anything like that, but maybe they just want to, like, you know, smoke a bunch of weed or something, or do other degenerate activities. The fear is that once you cross the line of authority, it might infringe on their freedom of action. And like, that's just where most people in the US are. Like, most conservatives, whatever you want to call them, like, they just want total freedom of action, and that's not what we want at all.
This is why the Adam and Such crowd fascinated me, because, well, at least for a while, it felt like their community was divided between people who understood that there was something wrong with our society fundamentally, and the people who just wanted to smoke pot and laugh at the SJWs for the 10 billionth time, or the wokies, as we call them now. And I guess eventually the people who wanted to just smoke pot and laugh at the wokies won out. But I can't help but believe that there's sort of an ember of a higher desire in those people, unless they're just completely lost. And I have a hard time believing that so many people would be completely lost to a higher aspiration, to higher desires.
Yeah, I think most people too just like kind of want to avoid being harmed, like I said, by the far left, and they'll try to avoid that at all costs, and sort of don't like having to do that. And when I talk to other millennials, like, about, you know, things I'm doing, or things like the Old Glory Club or this event, they can't really conceptualize. Like, I realize they don't understand at all why I would put my economic conditions or anything at risk for some like more abstract value, because basically we both share the goal of not being harmed by the left, but that's like that's not my highest goal, right? Like, I don't want to be hurt by leftists, but, you know, I'm willing to take the risk, obviously. Whereas most people, even if they oppose the far left, they're never willing to actually risk being harmed by the left. They're never going to put their neck out there, and they actually can't conceptualize like why someone would even do that. So there's this huge gap that I think we reactionaries, or whatever you want to say, there's a huge gap between us and like most of the people we would think is their allies. They're not actually allies or friends at all. They're just not really interested in us because we have no power.
No,
Yeah,
fair,
I mean,
fair enough. Oh, go ahead.
part of this, I think, like a lot of these people, they're never going to be allies because they're simply because of like their position in society, right? I mean, we have to start thinking that these are the people that we eventually want to be our clients, and not like people who are going to, you know, stand beside us. We have to provide something for them. And it doesn't need to be material per se, but it needs to be sort of demonstrated to them so that they can actually see that, you know, their lives will actually be better from this. Because it's sort of very hard to go up to somebody who just lives a normal life and, you know, explain to them that like actually things would be way better if you lost all these things that they sort of enjoy in the moment, for, you know, for goals that are being envisioned by people who aren't even part of the, you know, what they understand as the political process. But like if we had like if we had our own like Orania or something in North America, you know, then where people were actually living lives that would be sort of, you know, better than the way that they're living them, then they would actually be able to, you know, see what they would actually get out of this, right? And that the people there would be, you know, fulfilled in ways that they like didn't understand that they were missing. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I do. I do want to offer the normies something, but I just don't want to buy people with material, because I don't think it's appropriate to promise people material goods in the present day. I think people need to desire things that are, I mean, I'm not saying they need to desire, I mean, ultimately you need to desire God above all things, but it needs to be something more like order or family or posterity or meaning. This idea,
No,
I don't think I'm
absolutely.
going to offer people more dopamine hits than the World Economic Forum guys and Elon Musk or whatever. We have someone who's waiting to come in, so if anyone's, you know, done for the night, just let me know, and I'll you know.
I can
I'll
drop
hop
out
off.
if anyone wants to stay, because I'm just kind of hanging out.
Sure.
Unless anyone
Or,
has to go.
well, I mean, did you have anything to say? I mean, it was kind of your thread a little bit there with the whole normie thing. So I was kind of interested to hear what you had to say about the last thing about the buying normies or making them our clients, I guess. Sure, Lemon.
I think Charles Haywood has the best example of how to do this with this whole armed patronage network thing. I mean, basically, what you offer is, we kind of think that things are going to get far worse in not only just in every sense, material, whatever. And if you have the capacity to offer people, you know, literally protection from the anarchy, then that's how you buy them, basically. And not only do you buy them that way, but then you force them to conform to live your way, because you're literally going to be their lord in some sense. I guess that depends on how far things go, but I mean, that's sort of my plan as well. Is like, I've kind of like pre-collapsed my living conditions so that I can build, you know, off the grid while things are very cheap, as opposed to doing it later, which is also what, you know, Charles Haywood's kind of doing. And so, yeah, I mean, if you can just offer people security, and you're projecting in the future that they're not going to be able to get security from anyone except you, then you basically have them in a position where they can't refuse the both the values and, you know, material tasks you want to impose on them. I mean, obviously you're not going to force them to do it because they're going to agree to it, right? But they're going to agree to it because you're effectively fulfilling the role that the state does now, that we're thinking it's not going to be able to fulfill that role in the future on some timeline.
Mr. Dollinger, welcome.
Hi, good to talk to you again. It's been a little over a year, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. This is my first time on a podcast, so.
Well, I think wasn't I on your podcast, right?
Yeah.
Or
I always appreciate whenever you shout out the ugly polycule. On your live streams.
Oh, that's a great concept. I mean, I think I've known a few ugly polycules, but I think
the term is kind of redundant, but.
Well, no, there used to be, I guess, the people who are from like Silicon Valley or, you know, the whole Bay Area crowd that do the whole polyamorous if they don't call it polycules.
Mm-hmm.
I think polycules is distinctly a down market version of that. So probably by the time it gets to that class, it's probably pretty ugly. But hey, man, welcome. Are you coming to the conference or?
No, and I'll tell you the truth. I just found out the way to spell Scyldings. I think all of like 6 hours ago from your post. So.
Oh no problem. It's cool. I am a big fan of your. Are you still doing? I listened to it on and off the beautiful toilet, right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes.
I've done about 4 episodes this year. I kind of took a hiatus towards in the latter half of last year, not intentionally, but just because I have the I would say like the creative and productive habits of like a transgender electronic music producer. So.
I certainly know
I was a little erratic about putting them out, but I'm really trying to get back on the ball and you release them at least like bi-monthly these days.
I totally sympathize as someone with a Substack that's underfed myself.
Yeah.
So life comes at you really fast, and everyone here is trying to get in a position where they either have a family or they're getting a family, and this is something that is. It's not easy. It's not easy to accomplish, and it's strange because I mean, do you know? There seems to be a whole crowd going. There's a whole crowd of people who are operating out of New York that I have zero contact with, and I think the Carousel podcast is one of them, or is the guy who does Carousel. Is he out of LA? I can't remember.
That's Isaac Simpson, right?
Isaac Simpson. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I think we have mutual friends, but I think he's California based right now.
Okay.
I met him a handful of times, but I wouldn't say he's like a close personal friend, but I love his work. His Substack is probably my favorite at the moment. You know, yours notwithstanding, of course.
Yeah. Well, the few times I update it. But yeah, I mean the Isaac, he does a great interview podcast. So does Alex Kashuda. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because all of these networks are thinking in very similar ways, but they're all slightly disconnected. They're all slightly offset from each other. And what we're developing is kind of a common language to understand our problem. And
the last time I saw Isaac was he co-hosted this premiere of the Dividers movie, which is a documentary about He Will Not Divide Us, the cultural phenomenon of the 4chan era.
Oh wow, yeah.
And that was the most fun I'd ever had watching a movie in a theater. Like the audience was very plugged in and like aware of that piece of history, and it was just a great experience. So
if you like 4chan culture kind of stuff, you would like the film That Feel, TFW When No GF, That Feeling When No GF. It was actually
the movie that both made and broke Conpod.
Yes, it was. And interesting, one of the thinkers I'm drawing from actually was a co-producer in that movie, and that was Cody Wilson, the guy who is the 3D printer dude, 3D printed gun dude. So he had a big hand in that movie, which is, I think, fascinating.
The ultimate dream is for people to kind of find communities where they can go deep into things, and where they can find experiences that are unique and personal and intimate, but that we still at the same time maintain a common language so that we can communicate with each other and sort of cross-pollinate ideas as they become necessary. This is, I think everyone has sort of a vision of what this would look like, but people haven't quite figured out the details of it yet. Nick, I did have some super chats to answer. If you guys want to stay online and answer them, or did you have anything else you wanted to discuss?
Oh, I just wanted to contribute that I've actually had pretty good results trying to red pill my dad.
Oh, you did? Oh, we had to hear about this.
I mean,
I don't know. Ever pull their dad? How is it possible?
I don't want to blow up his spot. I mean, for reference, my parents are like, my dad is a lifelong business conservative that seems to care exclusively about taxes and I mean, I don't, maybe there's more to it than that, but to broadly oversimplify, and who voted for Brandon, he first time voting Democrat, I believe, in 2020. And my mom is a Gen X, lifelong liberal, never had an issue with gay people, even like back in the 80s, who nonetheless, well, I don't want to blow up her spot either, but I would say after spending some time with the new gender demographic, starts to sound more like Tucker Carlson than I'm accustomed to.
I don't know what is it that what did the younger millennials do to ruin the mystique of gayness that was built up in the 90s. They completely overcashed the Will and Grace check and the Sex and the City check until it's almost exhausted now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that my as far as red pilling my dad, though, I think that he's a very open-minded and smart person, and so he's just really taken to the Curtis Yarvin podcast episodes that I've sent his way. So,
okay. So that's interesting.
I don't know if it's like a comprehensive worldview change, but he just kind of listens to it. He's like, "Oh, that was pretty interesting." So.
That's how my Q Boomer uncle, my Q Boomer uncle is receptive to this more. Like, I was like, yo, did you watch that Tucker Carlson interview with Curtis Yarvin? He was like, that long-haired fella? Yeah, he was interesting. I don't believe him, but that was interesting. And he's like, anyway, let me tell you about the vote servers in Germany. And I'm like, no. You're missing the point.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a journey with the older generations, but that is really interesting. That I think that this is we're in for such sort of a radical change that I think our politics are just going to fundamentally realign, and I think that's what I don't really think that I think that Trump is going to be the last of a species of Republican politicians. And after Trump, there will be a total partisan realignment that will leave so many people confused, like the ant smells will all be mixed up, that they'll either realign out of necessity to what their actual interests look like or their actual passions look like, or they'll just tap out of politics because it'll be too exhausting to be used as an entertainment product the way that it was in the 2000s and the 2010s to a large degree. So, I think that will be very much on the horizon. Anyway, guys, any other topics you want to discuss before we head on to the super chats? Any thoughts about organizing, basque weaving, or the Scyldings conference? Because that's what we're here to discuss.
I just want to add that I think that small teams who do not fall into the organizational network that we're building for kind of these semi-larger groups with, Exit, Beowulf, New Founding. I think that there is something for them to do. I think that there was a children's book that I read as a kid that was about this evil middle school teacher who made all the kids sew. And her ethos was idle hands make for devil's work, right? And that was part of the book. I can't remember the name of it, but I think that even the people who have no network to attach to, if you have a couple dudes you basket weave with, you can do something. So that's something that I want to hammer home in my speech, and hopefully, some spirit of what Turnip said last year will kind of come through in that even the individual can do something.
The small teams model is an excellent idea, but really my thought on this matter is that there has to be sort of the big networking, like we're all going to go to a bar and have a drink kind of basque weaving events, but then there have to be people breaking off from that and doing more focused areas of interest, because it's only in the focus that the true bonds are made. People who go to the same church, people who play the same sports, or working on a similar project content wise or artistic wise. Go ahead.
One of the problems with the small teams model is the same problem that you see with like guerrilla warfare and whatnot. it's ultimately an asymmetric payoff that is a strategy that presumes a certain advantage you have over the enemy. That is, you have a surplus of something that you're willing to trade off in exchange for inefficiency, because that's the thing that, for example, with like the difference between mega downloads versus magnet files or peer-to-peer sharing. Peer-to-peer sharing presumes that you're willing to trade off a lot more time to wait for your files to download versus the security and anti-fragility of, well, it's peer-to-peer. There's no central servers to take down. Likewise, in the case of like cell-based organizational structures and whatnot, one of the problems with that is it presumes there's a certain disposability of human capital in order to have that anti-fragility of, well, if you burn a cell, you burn a cell.
Well,
So I-
our main vulnerability is the liability when it comes to large organizations, which is why the large organizations have to be vague for the time being until
Yeah.
we can establish like rock solid rules.
Right.
Because
So,
the problem is that if you just you can do this in Discord servers if you want. You can just start to go into a Discord server, make everyone part of a club, and then incorporate it and put it out there as the new something front. You'll get so many feds, you'll get so many sociopaths, and they'll be indistinguishable and they'll take the whole thing down. Before anything like that is even built, there needs to be groups of people who have a certain understanding of quality, of common purpose, of common language. And the only way that can be built, it appears, in my opinion, is to sort of seed the ground with Curtis Yarvin's acorns, so to speak. Small groups of people who are working on things that are not so tightly affiliated. And so that's sort of how I see the asymmetry working in this regard, David.
Oh yeah. That makes sense. I just wanted to provide a countervailing voice on the matter, simply because there's a tendency to view everything in rosy-eyed lenses, rose-tinted lenses on things like small teams, because ultimately we do need to kind of keep that vision in the back of our mind of, okay, when we successfully say, let's say, for example, we get the next Texas governor is a guy who's read all of our literature, like what Blake Masters was kind of supposed to be, but wasn't.
Yeah.
What do we do when we get there? When we actually start getting a foothold in national level politics, and
can he fund us? I mean, I don't know, right? I mean, patronage networks is that comes to mind. I mean, if you want people writing policy briefs, that's something that people can talk about. But the problem where we're going to be eternally dealing with on the policy front is the fact that a large mass of elite people just oppose anything that smells remotely like the kind of things that we have as an endpoint vision. And breaking down that resistance needs to be our primary priority, which is why I think people like Yoram Harzoni are so absolutely valuable to us right now. I think Harzoni has a lot of the right ideas, a lot of the right priorities. He's blind to a lot of things, culturally speaking, that I think for him as an Israeli, it's hard for him to see. But it's not necessary for him to see those things. All it's necessary for him to do is get our elite superstructure thinking in the right direction so that they're more receptive to playing ball with certain other directions that society could take to survive. And, once that happens, once you have a network that can sustain patronage, both cultural and financial, I think that one thing kind of leads to another. Maybe I'm being overly optimistic, but that's my impression, right?
and I'll just add two things to your argument, or against your argument, since you're attacking small teams and I'm the small teams guy. I will say that you have to come to the event to see what I'm bringing from Cody Wilson's thinking to get the full picture of
Another reason to buy a ticket, ladies and gentlemen.
another reason to buy a ticket.
Operators
Buy,
are
buy.
standing by.
Buy the executive platinum plan, and you'll have a bespoke travel agent help arrange.
Your hotel room stay. No, so there is something from the praxis of Cody Wilson coming from the theory of Baudrillard for the people who do not get to the larger organizing principles. And that's kind of what I'm driving at. I'm not saying that is the total end goal for every person in the dissident right, the reactionary sphere. That's not what I'm saying the end goal for everyone is, but I'm saying that is a significant and important role for some of us, and that's what I'm kind of driving at.
Excellent. I'm going to get onto the super chats. So Kevin Hine for $3 says, I was listening to your stream back in August, and you said we needed to see if Republicans can win. What do you believe are the consequences of Republicans not being able to win? Thanks. Well, I don't think that Republicans, as they exist currently, are a viable party to hold power. I think they're a spoiler. I think that Trump is kind of a wrecking ball, and it would be interesting to see what happens if he runs again, which I think he will, or I think he will. I should say, I think he will run in the main election again. I think he will win the primary, but I don't think that he'll be allowed to win. And I think that even if he did, he wouldn't really be able to wield power. And so what we're saying is in either event, people will come out of 2024 probably with a renewed impression that we live in a one-party state that's Democrat in character, and where Republicans exist as sort of a relief valve, a false option, not a serious party. And we're going to go from there. And after 2024, I think a lot of people will reconsider what actually is going on in this country. Maybe not. Maybe we'll just be back to the Daily Show 3.0 or whatever. But it strikes me as unlikely. Any thoughts on that question about Republicans from the panel? All right, we'll go on to the next one. Owen Zelensky for $3 USA. Hello, Dave. I'm not going to be able to attend Scyldings due to time and money, though I have been basque weaving. Is there anything you would suggest people do if they can't attend? Well, I mean, other than try to build up your basque weaving circle, I'll definitely do a read.
Buy the book after it's released. Buy the book.
Oh yeah, I've been told that I should show the event book to help out the organization of new events. But the other thing is that we will have to what we will want to do is I'll do a rehash of the event after as part of a podcast. And I think also what we will eventually want to do as well through basque weaving is to hold many events in sort of other areas. And I'm thinking particularly in the coastal areas. And there's a model I've always kind of wanted to see if I could replicate, that was the Theology on Tap model, where you would just set up a miniature speaking series at a local pub and then have people come, and it's a lot of fun typically. And I'm wondering if a large enough basket weaving organization couldn't pull something like that off.
So like a recreation of the old lecture halls that used to exist in postbellum America?
The Chautauquas or the Grange Hall type thing. But I mean, people do this all the time. People do speaking series at pubs, and it usually is very effective. I think it's a great. I think that this kind of went the way of the dinosaurs back in 2013 for some reason. But I don't see why it couldn't be something that we couldn't re-pioneer. I think people are dying to build community locally and to sort of feel like they have a community of allies that are connected to a broader intellectual tradition. And I don't see why that wouldn't be a way of fostering that. I mean, think of how many dissident intellectuals are just in a space like, the greater New York, New Jersey area. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of people that feel like they don't have a voice or feel like they don't have a base of support. If that were to change, if people became more open, I don't know. It feels like a world of possibilities could open up.
I can recommend, as far as New York is concerned, there's and in line with what you were saying about theology on tap in that model, there's a new debating, more like a public forum kind of society called the James Duane Society, which is conducting spirited debates about the issues facing the modern right. They actually had one today. I couldn't go, unfortunately, but they had one today, the subject of which is all of the resolution being all art is degenerate. And it's the previous one before that, I think, was resolved ride the tiger.
I guess is the alternative fight the tiger.
Yeah, I think something to that effect. I mean, it's meant to, the thing is, it's like a very loose form, it's done in the style of Oxford debate.
Yeah, Lincoln Douglas thing. I used to do that back in the day.
I did Lincoln Douglas. That's way more involved though. It's like one-on-one. Like this is more like a town hall style event. So I think it's Googleable. So there's always that.
That's pretty cool. I mean, I can never make it into New York, but but that sounds awesome though. Maybe we could organize an event to see one of those things one time. But I'm gonna keep on going. Was there any more thoughts on that? Okay, American Covidia for $5 USA. Hi Dave, I've noticed a generational gap towards homeschooling. Young parents at my church are taking the left's conversion rate of their kids more seriously. I wonder what the left's reaction will be towards parallelism over time. Cheers. Well, I mean, we've already seen that the left is getting incredibly hostile towards parallelism. The question is what happens when the baby boomers completely retire? Will they be able to take action against it? It seems that once they do, the gig's kind of up, because any pretense of them being laissez-faire in any regards will fade with a direct attack on homeschooling. And this will also sort of rouse the right to some to take more radical actions. But
I'm of two minds of this, because I come from the homeschooling sphere, raised in it, my mother's milk and whatnot. And so one of the things that they like to tout as a statistic around the late aughts, early 2010s, when Obama came into office, and you had the most fringe of the Tea Partyists really kind of sounding the battle cry about how he's like a crypto Marxist Muslim and whatnot. One of the things they gave hope in was that there's this transitionary period where once you become like 4% of the population, you start becoming a political threat. 8%, you are a political threat. And then by 12%, generally speaking, for electoral politics purposes, it's kind of impossible to squash you because you're too valuable of an ally. You'll find some sort of coalition that you can build with. And so, on the one hand, homeschooling is really just rocketing. Past that, there was a period of stagnation that was kind of happening. Then COVID happened, and it just doubled their numbers overnight, to where now it's like, I think the last I checked, the numbers was something like 9% or something like that. Well on its way to becoming that realm of that vaunted 12% figure. And at the same time, what was it? There was this recent poll that showed that millennials and Gen Z, something like 20 to 30%, depending on which generation you're talking about, were okay with the government installing literal surveillance cameras just straight in your rooms.
This is an interesting divergence, because the one thing that I'm noticing about my own generation, I think it's only going to get worse for you youngins, because you guys are all younger than me, some a lot younger than me, but there's just, and I realize this debating, what was it, Matt McManus, because he's the same age as I am pretty much. And one time I mean, he's still quoting, Charles Murray about how, blue state Americans have such good family lives. progressives have almost no kids. In my generation, in my cohort, the people who are conservative have so many more kids than the progressives. And it's not like the conservatives are having that many more kids. It's that the people who are progressive or very progressive are having zero or almost none. And this is going to create, if this continues, and it seems like it will, this is going to create a radical divergence between the perceptions of family life between progressives and non-progressives.
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. I mean, it
really
means a bunch of childless people are going to be anti-homeschooling, probably, but I can't imagine they're going to care more about opposing homeschooling than the other people will care about promoting it or continuing it.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting asymmetry, because if you look at in terms of numbers, for various reasons, Gen Z and the millennials are just becoming more and more liberal at the same time. Like, you're just getting like this super condensed, very shock troopy almost core of people, like between 30 and 40%, that are just absolutely not having it. They your grandfather's Republicans wanted to go back to the politics of the 50s. Our generation's it's a couple of 50s back in terms of centuries that we want to go back to. Like that is
we don't want to go back. We only want to go forward. But there are certain timeless truths that have been left behind.
Well, yeah,
that need to have a renaissance. So
I'm one of the biggest counter signalers to people that romanticize Ludditism, but yeah, there are perennial truths and whatnot, and so it's definitely going to be very interesting times that we live in. We were not blessed with boring times.
Indeed, we were not. And the next super chatter, Astro MG, for $50. Thank you very much. Hey Dave, longtime listener here since 2017. Wow, that's a very long time. That's when I started my channel. I'm defending my PhD in a technical field next week, and I hope to be more involved politically going forward. I'm a rare per-urbanism right-winger and interested in conversations surrounding that topic and more. I would love to meet you in person someday and chat. Keep fighting the good fight. Cheers. Well, that brings back traumatic memories of me defending my own PhD, like the same week that I got married. That whole 10-day period was just a massive blur. I barely remember anything. But yeah, the wedding got rescheduled to this insane time. But Godspeed. PhD defense is always really stressful, but you'll be glad when it's finally over, and you'll be able to publish or bury your PhD thesis in a way that's satisfactory. I guarantee you'll feel better afterwards. Pro-urbanism right wing. Yeah, I've been a defender of that too. And one of my favorite Scyldings talks was the one that Radliv gave in was it London, the British Scyldings conference, where he talked about urbanism and the early Christian communities in urban areas. Does anyone have thoughts on right-wing urbanism?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important for us. Largely just because you can get a concentration of people there, right? I mean, in a weird way, it's sort of easier to build a dissident community within a city than it is, at least if you're trying to get people who are, actually dissidents like us, or sorry, sensible centrists. Just because you're going to have a lot more people in there, right? I mean, I'm in a sort of semi-rural area in Canada, and there's basically nobody here, right? So it's sort of very difficult to actually build a community unless you actually have large numbers of people there, just because of how small our actual numbers are in comparison to the total population.
Yeah, this is why the American community needs to increase the basket. We can find another order of magnitude at least. And we increased it this year. We need to increase it again and we need to keep the quality as we go up, because that's the only way forward. For instance, I heard that last year it was impossible to organize in Toronto, and now people are organizing there. So that's hopeful.
What, they have 10 million people and they couldn't organize anything?
10 million people where?
In the greater Toronto area. Wasn't there,
Well, I mean, I think we're just talking about like the groups of people who have ideas roughly sympathetic to.
yeah, I know. I'm just kind of like shocked.
I think everyone in Canada is kind of afraid. I mean, I have a lot of experience with a lot of Canadian cities. Toronto is not one of them, but I get the sense that it's very progressive, and that I don't know, does anyone live in Toronto?
I visited on hockey tournaments, and well, like I went to Mississauga and kind of toured around Toronto when I visited for the couple hockey tournaments I went up there for. So it's kind of the greater Toronto downtown is like split into thirds. 1/3 is like basically Koreatown, 1/3 is India, 1/3 is Canadian. So that also complicates things.
Yeah,
You know,
so it sounds a little like Vancouver then.
yeah, so it's like I don't know how far you have to degrade your stats, your pop stats, to get to like, well, how many communities actually generate dissident people to basket weave with. So that's like another thing to add into your equation.
But yeah, another important dimension of right-wing urbanism is that ultimately, for better or for worse, that is the natural accretion points for elites. Simply because cities have that, even though they're IQ shredders, the reason why they're ultimately IQ shredders is that they offer this tantalizing thing that you really can't get in the countryside easily. That is the company of other elites, ultimately.
Yeah. It's the Versailles effect. That's why cities exist. They exist so that you can rub elbows with other people who are ambitious and want to really take a shot at the heights of power and artistic achievement. Now, I wonder if that's going to maintain if the cities continue to degenerate like they have for the past 3 years, that there might be attempts to kind of decamp to more rural areas, especially if what I hear coming out of, well, never, I won't. I've heard a lot of belly aching about San Francisco and other urban areas from people who previously would always sing their praises, which led me to believe that there might be a preference cascade building up under the surface. But I don't live in those cities anymore, so I can't really say.
I feel oh, sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, you actually do live in that. I should have asked.
No, I'm like very predisposed to be like favorable to right wing urbanism, just based on my position. I mean, I'm very loyal to my enclave in southern Brooklyn, which is I call it based Brooklyn because around here it's like there's always like posters everywhere for like some Chinese person or Russian Jew that's running for local office as a Republican, like it's definitely like the last remnants of like the like white ethnic communities that live here, and of course they have a very anti-crime values and such. But even so, despite all of this, like I feel that my own dalliance with New York is very much like a contingent thing where it pertains to a particular period in life. But I honestly would dread the day of having to raise children, especially like a daughter, like in the city. And so I don't really know if it's I don't know. I'm like pretty wary of it, despite the benefits that it provides, just because I think with it just being like the milieu that you live in, unless you have like a very close knit society like the Hasids, it's very difficult to promote your values intergenerationally. And I think there's so many liabilities that come with it and so much instability. But yeah, it's great for networking. It's I
wonder how
you have a lot of friends.
do it. I wonder how the Hasids do it. I really do.
I mean, I think that they might, to varying degrees, they might not.
I know that they bend the rules,
speak the English language, or read or write, or I mean, it's
they
also
bend the rules a little bit around the edges of what would ordinarily be considered potentially, protective covenants, the
Yeah,
harder civil rights regulations, that sort of stuff.
they
I mean,
kind
there's
of
like the block like right down the street from me is pretty much like all entirely Hasidic, but I have like pretty favorable feelings about them. I've never had like one as a landlord, but like generally speaking, like they're very benign, like
No,
friendly and even generous, like in ways that you wouldn't expect. So
it's a reactionary success story as far as I'm concerned. I want to
Yeah.
I want to know what their secret is.
yeah,
I guess
Insofar as we could get away with doing that, which probably you couldn't, but I mean, like hey, anybody who is a true believer in something that isn't this deracinated, techno dystopia future that we're moving into is in some sense an ally, if not disconnected for other reasons. So
well, I actually come from, I live in a Hasidic neighborhood now, or at least like a mixed like Chinese Hasidic neighborhood, but I come from Amish country, so
even better.
I've been going on a bit of a deep dive on this because I found this guy who left the Amish, who does a bunch of videos about his experiences with the Amish and whatnot, and doing giving a less romanticized take on them. And on the one hand, both the Amish and like the Hasidics are really good examples of reactionary communities getting success and just not being harassed. At the same time, in the case of the Hasidics, they do just genuinely have certain political elements, shall we say, in respect to Dave's YouTube channel, certain political elements that give a certain amount of shelter to any types of secondary effects of their activities and whatnot that could get them
the
blowback.
SPLC is not going to be considering them prominently for their hate list anytime soon.
SPLC, ADL, and whatnot. And in the case of the Amish, it's partially because they really cling to the economic edges. Like they'll buy out the least productive land that you still could. That's not like outright desert and things like that. As well as to a certain degree, they have pretty good optics simply because they're pacifist. And the downside of that potentially is that ultimately it's like, well, how are you gonna like culturally turn on a dime when you come from this very kind of inbred community, not in a denigrative way, but that it literally is inbred both medically and genetically to be this very it's not like a labased, well, we're technically pacifist, but we have everything that we could turn into like a para-industrial, decentralized guerrilla state or something like that. In the same way, like Japan could, turnkey and become a nuclear state or something like that. It's they're much more like their greatest industrial capacity, for example, is like barn raising, and so ultimately their entire success depends upon the beneficence of English law, which, given there are certain problems and whatnot, that's kind of irrelevant. The cracking on them might come sooner than later.
Well, I understand. Anything can be killed, especially by the United States military. But the main challenge for most communities in modernity is just existing and staving off the siren call of consumeristic culture.
Yeah.
We can talk about them being able to repel Abrams tanks another day, right? So it's fine. But
there's another aspect too, where in some respects, like they're very hostile to worldly ambition, but in other ways, like they have like this very Protestant industriousness. So, from my own life, like my grandmother sold her house, the one that I'd known my whole life when I was a teenager. She sold it to an Amish family. And the first thing they did was put up 2 giant like metal grain silos before she even moved out. She didn't build this, like, and like they they get very they're very into like development in that sense within like very particular constraints, and of course they double their population every 30 years. So but of course, like they make themselves marginal with their like total lack of interest in cultural production and intellectual life. I think that there's also an underrated aspect to both like the Hasids and the Amish, that they make themselves seem non-threatening simply by looking funny. Like without trying to be like the dog, like they both like, because you look at them and they feel quaint instinctively.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's easily adopted. I don't know if like wearing funny costumes is like a praxis for like traditional.
Weird Al made the Amish look threatening.
But it is peculiar when you think about the Hasidic Jews too, right? Because there's nothing in the Talmud that says that you have to dress like someone from like 19th century Lithuania. Like this is very culturally contingent, and yet it does like mark them as like as their group. Of course, it's based on like Talmudic, principles about like covering your head and such. But
part of it might be that the quaintness will helps with them, in that it marks them as an outgroup, but it's an outgroup that isn't coded as being politically aggressive. Like I know for a fact that for example, Doug Wilson out in Moscow, Idaho, who's turned what was previously known as Cold Berkeley into a kind of purple town because he's attracted so many conservative Presbyterian Christian types up there, that just kind of dressing traditionally Anglo-American nicely, so wearing a suit in a casual setting, or wearing a nice-ish sort of dress is enough to get you marked out as someone who's friendly with Wilson, that it will get you harassed. So it can kind of cut both ways in that, yes, on the one hand, if you make sure to set it up that coding your group means that you're just non-threatening and you just want to keep growing, then yeah, that will help. At the same time, if you at all want to maintain any type of aggressive posture, even in a defensive manner, an aggressive posture, just trying to preserve your own liberties, it might backfire.
Well, I definitely think there is something to the dress for success idea, but we can't explore that right now because we probably are running to the end of our stream right now. We're over time here. Darth Calhoun for $3 says, I wish I could go to the event. I have a funeral to attend, so I'm not going that weekend. Instead, I'm plugging my own Substack. It is Darth Calhoun at substack.com. I can definitely recommend that. I subscribe to Darth Calhoun. Everyone else should as well. Thank you very much, Darth Calhoun, for the $3, and we'll hope to see you at future events. And then lastly, we have Sam153 for $10 USA. The event sounds like it's going great. I'll hopefully find my way down from Kanukistan to the event next time. Have fun, everyone. Cheers. Well, thank you very much, Sam153. Anyway, are there any other thoughts about we have one person who's coming in, Black Horse. So maybe I'll keep the stream going a little bit longer for him. But any other thoughts? We were talking about the Amish there for a second, but I will say this. I think that if dressing well, if dressing sort of conservatively became a uniform for people who are not progressive, or a way of marking yourself out as somebody who's not progressive, that would be an interesting cultural development. I'll say that for sure. And I'm not so sure what that would, because I don't exactly know how the establishment would deal with that. There we go. There's Black Horse.
I mean, what's his name? Was it Fetterman is still technically banned from going into the congressional chambers for any length of period of time beyond voting if he's not wearing a suit. Like he wants to keep the hoodie on, so he's like at the threshold of the Senate chambers, and he'll like go in whenever there's a vote to do it, according to what I've read. Like,
by the way, guys, someone needs to drop out so Black Horse can come in.
Oh, I can drop out.
Oh, well, nice talking to you, Nick. Hope to talk to you sometime in the future. And
likewise,
have a good time. Stay safe out there in the apocalypse there in New York.
Yeah, appreciate it. Sorry to crash your Scyldings party.
My eyes are burning right now because of it. So, yeah, it must be even worse up there. All right.
All right, take care.
Cheers, guys. Bye. All right. Welcome, Black Horse. How's it going?
Not too bad. How about you?
Good, good. We were talking what were we just talking about? We were talking about
A conservative dress as a
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fairly bullish on this as an emergent property of the two coalitions.
Do you think everyone's gonna be dressing like hoodies, like John Fetterman in the future for the progressives? And
I think so. I mean,
you're kind of breaking up a little bit. Can anyone else hear him?
Is that better? Is that better?
It's still breaking up for me, so I think it's your connection, Black Horse.
It's quiet for me.
Yeah, it's a little
Is that
quiet.
better?
That's a little bit better. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think this is an emergent property of the status leaders on the progressive side. So it's becoming increasingly clear that the leaders of the progressive coalition are the West Coast tech types. And so you can see all that coalition falling in with the fashions that they've set. So
Yeah.
my guess is that in 10 years, everybody on that side will want to dress like Mark Zuckerberg.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I got that the West Coast tech types are setting the standards for dress. And I mean, why not counter signal that, right? If hoodies and sweatpants are going to be the direction they're going in, or rainbow outfits, they go rainbow outfits, we go earth tones, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I also think there's kind of a space for you to be ambiguous in the battle between the West Coast and East Coast progressive elites, right? Because you can already see the fracture in fashion between New York and San Francisco at the moment. So,
oh yeah,
so
for sure.
So the turtleneck is the fashion of the purple Caesar.
something like that.
That sounds horrifying. I don't want to be ruled by a man who wears a hoodie. I really don't. And I always thought Mark Zuckerberg's fashion sense was incredibly disrespectful for a man that had his power. I felt personally insulted by it. I felt if you wield that power, you need to dress the part. And this idea that you're dressing like you're a college student and running $1 billion company and then excusing it because, it's just clothes, man. It feels just fundamentally disrespectful.
In fairness to Zuckerberg, he did actually make it a uniform. It wasn't just random clothes.
But that style.
But that's even worse.
That style began as an intended flex. So people on the West Coast dress like that to demonstrate that they don't have to respect you, right?
Yeah.
You saw this all through IPO culture in the 90s, where founders who believed that they were sufficiently high status would intentionally dress down in order to humiliate their investors who expected them to wear a suit.
Yeah.
I'm not sufficiently educated in the origin of West Coast fashions to comment on that. From what I've read on what was like Zuckerberg's and to a certain degree Jobs' whole thing was like a uniform and image. Jobs was like more cultivated and thoughtful in terms of aesthetic, whereas Zuckerberg, it seemed more he framed it in terms of decision fatigue and whatnot. That I'm not going to make a decision every single day. I like something kind of comfortable, and I'm just going to wear the standard set of hoodies and jeans or whatever and that's going to be my everyday thing. I'm not going to. It's low fashion, but with an intention that at least was framed in the public as not as an intention of disrespect, but rather as an attention economy optimization factor.
I think it's a little bit both. We're still having a hard time hearing you, Black Horse, but I don't know, maybe you can work on the connection a little bit more. But I can definitely vouch for the fact that the West Coast casual is a power flex on the East Coast. They were trying to make a break from the corporate culture of specifically what it's a flex on is IBM's corporate culture, because IBM's corporate culture was notoriously suit and tie, like the Dilbert outline. Like the Dilbert uniform is an idea of the classic IBM outfit or the Packard Bell outfit, I think, or Bell Labs. And the 90s Silicon Valley was a response to that very consciously. So I'm sure Zuckerberg has a story about why he does the hoodie thing. But to me, I mean, when you go from wanting to flip the bird to rich venture capitalists to wanting to flip the bird to stakeholders that are essentially your users, then the character of that changes significantly. Oops. There's Black Horse. All right. Let's try that one more time.
How's that?
Oh, much better. Much better.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. But I think that it's great we can have you on Black Horse because you're one of the core people behind the Beowulf stuff. So it's very good to kind of hear your perspectives on this and see what your thoughts are on the year going forward and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very pleased with how the events we've done so far have come out. I think the event in Nashville has the opportunity to be very good for the network, be very good for kind of bringing people into alignment, into toward a vision that we can kind of propagate here. For Beowulf, like the next steps are to start reaching beyond the explicitly political. So some of the next events that we're at the moment trying to put together are in the area of art and in the area of, like, in this case, is mythic culture rather than other types of culture. But we want to have a cultural dimension as well as an explicitly political dimension. And we're trying to encourage basket weaving to step beyond just meeting somebody and talking politics for a couple of hours and step into a set of communities that are authentically reactionary in the context of their local community. So it's going to look a little bit different in Canada. It's going to look a little bit different on the east coast of the US. It's going to look a little bit different in the UK. But we want people to have an opportunity to build distinct cultures that are localized in their basket weaving communities and start to kind of build up institutions of those communities. And you'll see this most in the basket weaving communities that are largest, but we're working with those communities to support them in the next steps for each one at the moment.
That's you're still a little bit quiet, but I think we got all of that. I mean, I'll repeat it if people couldn't hear that. The next step forward, we're reaching the end of the stream, so this is a fair enough time to kind of break off. But what the next step for basket weaving is to take this to develop communities of interest in communities of local loyalty, and that's going to be sort of an interesting step to overcome, because not all basket weaving communities are large enough to accomplish that at this stage, at least. And so they need to kind of push forward into specific areas of interest and become more local too. I would be very interested to see how the events go surrounding the art and sort of metaculture things you've been talking about, Black Horse. But I don't know if we really have information on that yet.
Well, we're not at a stage yet where we're ready to announce all that, but it's certainly something to look for over the next 6-8 months.
Excellent. Guys, we are a little over time. I was really glad to hear from Black Horse, but did you guys, anyone else on the panel, the call-in show, quote unquote, have any additional thoughts before we end for tonight?
Let's have a good time at the next event. It's going to be dope. Buy. Buy your tickets now at Scyldings.com/events. It's going to be great. Operators are standing by to take your order.
And in case you're illiterate, it's Scyldings is spelled SCYLIDN or INDG or however. It's spelled.
I can spell it for you if you want.
Yeah, the link is in the description, guys. That's how I actually remembered. Black Horse, I have one last question for you. Sure. Very intimate. Are your eyes burning right now because of the smoke?
Yeah, it's brutal.
I'm not trying to dox you. That's pretty general, but
It's
I
brutal.
mean, yeah.
Ugh.
I'm crying right now because of the smoke.
Not gonna lie,
Yeah,
I was hacking up a lung this morning.
It's been
Mm.
terrible here too.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
it's
S was
not.
probably got the worst of it of anyone on this panel, but I was working in the city earlier in the week, and I just had to come home. Like, I just couldn't take it anymore. So,
Yeah, it's rough. Well, guys, thank you so much for appearing on the call-in show. We'll see if this is going to be a semi-regular thing. But it's great to talk to people and not have to do the majority of the talking for one of these podcasts. And everyone had very interesting things to say. And I'll be looking forward to seeing all of you at the Scyldings conference in 2 weeks now, I think. So yeah, it'll be great. Hope to see you all there, and have a wonderful evening and a blessed rest of the week.
Thanks, Dave. You as well.
Have a good day.
See ya.